How's it going today, folks? Welcome to the Political Goat, and I'm your host, Uncle Felix. Today, we're going to talk about a few different topics, so we should have some fun. I'm going to talk with my tax guy, Chris Hallstrom. We're going to talk about Joe Biden's plans for our retirement plans, aka our 401ks, etc. We're also going to talk a little bit about the circus going on with the Supreme Court. I'm also going to go over my Power 5 NFL rankings, and we're going to recap a little bit of Steelers football. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on my guest. Again, his name is Chris Hallstrom. I call him my tax guy. For those of you that don't know, he's a licensed CPA in Rhode Island and in Arizona. He's also a certified member of the Institute of Professionals in Taxation. He is also pursuing his Master's of Taxation from the University of Villanova. And by the way, he has 18 years of professional experience, so this guy knows what he's talking about. So let me bring him on. One moment. Hey, Chris, how you doing today?
Hey, how's it going, Uncle Felix?
Not bad, not bad. That Patriot logo, is that allowed on this show? I don't know.
I wasn't going to wear any Steelers gear.
You're lucky I can't blur that thing up. I tried. Sure. I tried actually, but let's get on to the subject at hand. I contacted you because I wanted to talk about something I read, and that was Joe Biden's proposed changes to our retirement plans, and I know you would could further elaborate on that. So, without further ado, let us have it.
So, one of the many different talking points or tax policy ideas that Biden has thrown around has been regarding the trying to change the 401k structure, at least how the benefits of the tax qualified plan would work. Now, just to kind of take a step back, this guy described briefly like how a tax qualified plan works and how it interacts with each other. Whether you're using an IRA or a 401k, a 403b, most of the time, I would say most people understand the 401k structure.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, it works in one of two ways. You can have the traditional approach. And in the traditional approach, contributions that you make are not taxable when you make them, so i.e. deducted from your income.
Yep.
And the earnings on the plan while you have it invested over a period of time until retirement grow tax-free. And then when you withdraw it, you get taxed then. So the ultimate benefit of that is the growth in the earnings tax-free. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, you would hope that your tax rate at the time that you retire and the amount you're drawing out will be lower than your tax income rate now.
Yes.
So you're trying to defer taxes, and then you'll actually get a tax benefit by deferring that to the point in which you retire.
It's a great incentive to have a retirement plan.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of that, you have the Roth, which is the other option.
Mm-hmm.
That works a little differently in a sense that you don't get the deduction up front. You still make a contribution, but you make the contribution after tax, which means it is subject to taxable income.
Mm-hmm.
And the earnings are still earned tax-free, but when you withdraw in retirement, you pay no tax on that at all. So there's no tax on the withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
You pay the tax now, you don't have to pay it later. It's pretty much the opposite of the traditional model.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that Biden put together, take another step back, most of the time these are employer-sponsored,
mm-hmm.
and a good amount of employers, when they put these programs together, will match your contribution to a certain dollar amount. So they may put it in and say, well, we're going to give you, 20% of your match or your contribution up to a certain dollar amount. Or they may say, we'll give you a 25% of your first 6% of the earnings that you put away. So there's always some sort of contribution match from your employer. It's another incentive. That is a situation where they get a deduction as if they're making additional payroll. It doesn't show up on your W-2 anywhere. And again, like the traditional contributions, you would get taxed on it at the end when you withdraw it. But it's a benefit to the employer. It's a benefit to you because it's money that you are potentially leaving on the table if you don't contribute, and you get the money in the payout in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So what Biden is proposing is that he wants to change the way the traditional model works, and not necessarily the Roth. In fact, several articles had indicated that he has no intention of changing the Roth structure. But what he wants to do is say, listen, that traditional structure where before you would get that as a deduction, you get that pre-tax. He doesn't want to do that anymore. He wants.
Well, let's ask him actually. Hey, Joe, is that true?
He looks really confused, Felix. I wouldn't ask him to do too many complicated questions.
No.
So in a nutshell, they want to make sure they're changing the way that the traditional model would work, so that when you make your contribution and you're doing that, it's not going to get deducted from your taxable income base, and it's going to get taxed to the current period. But on the flip side, he wants to give you a 26% tax credit at the end of the year that he will then deposit into your retirement account for you.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this work out mechanically is a little convoluted. If you are in a tax bracket under 26%, you could arguably say, look, this is a good win for me. My marginal tax rate, or the amount that every dollar of income that I earn over an amount, is subject to, say that you're in the 12% tax bracket, which is, generally speaking, you have taxable income, you're married filing jointly, you're looking at 80,000 or so, or that. Mm-hmm. You're going to be potentially in the 12% tax bracket. You say, well, listen, I'm going to lose the 12% benefit that I would get by deducting it today. But if he's going to give me 26% as a credit, why don't I want this?
Exactly.
And the reality of it is you've got to go through all the motions. There's a lot more moving parts to this than just that. Mm-hmm. And I have an example. I'm going to try to illustrate it, and it's going to be hard to do over a telecom or a video without seeing graphs and charts and all the other things that make us accountants really moist and geeky. But what we have here is you get the Cowers. The Cowers is all these households, by the way, they're all neighbors. They're all living near each other, and they all have a similar fact pattern. The same amount of kids, both married, in a single household. So we're talking incomes across the board. That's the only really differentiator between these groups. So you got the Cowers, and they're making $80,000 of taxable income per year. They, try to contribute $10,000 a year to their retirement account. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. That means that year one, when they make the contribution, they're at a 12% tax bracket. They're going to get a $1,200 benefit. Now you got the Connors. They're up the street next to the Cowers, and they're making about $170,000 a year. They're also going to put together $10,000 in contributions. They're going to get a $2,200 benefit because their marginal tax rate is around 22%. Mm-hmm. You say, all right, well, that's still lower than 26, but we're not there yet. Now you got the Roethlisbergers. Now those guys, they're doing all right. They got a household taxable income of around 3.25. They're doing pretty good. They're in a 24% marginal tax bracket, so they're going to get a today benefit of $2,400. Still, you think, Biden's plan is going to get them an extra $200. Mm-hmm. Well, then you have the Brady's down the street. Brady's, they're doing fantastic. And they now live in a zero income tax state. But before that, they were living down the street from the rest of the Steeler crew, and they had incomes over $335K. They're going to get taxed at a 32% bracket. So automatically, this proposal is going to hurt the Brady's. Mm-hmm. It's going to potentially benefit the Roethlisbergers and maybe the Connors. Mm-hmm. So you start to see this through. Now, all of them live in a state with an income tax for state purposes. So now you're not going to get the deduction. Now your AGI goes up. Your AGI being your adjusted gross income. So yes, you may get the federal benefit, and you say, well, 26 here, and you get the 12 over here, I'm net benefit of 14%. That's going to get diluted because you're paying a potential 5% or higher state income tax rate on that previously deferred income.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to cut into your potential savings. Now, on top of that, you got to look at the bigger factor of your employer. Your employer previously would get a deduction and you get a match. Is that still going to exist? Is that still going to take place? Is he going to make the deduction to the employer no longer relevant? If that's the case, then are you losing out dollar for dollar, or are they going to bonus it to you, which is again subject to tax, and you're not getting anything deferred that way? There's just a ton of additional hurdles that you're going to go through. And then the other component to that is, if you were not going to get a deduction up front, what's to stop you from then converting all of your retirement plans to Roth? And at least then, now you may not get it up front, but you're going to get it at the end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now,
I know we spoke about it earlier off the air, and it does seem like it's more like you're not too confident that this will even be officially proposed, right? There's just too much change. It doesn't make honestly much sense to do it. It's revenue neutral. It seems like more of a talking point, wouldn't you say?
I will tell you, if I was a betting man, I would bet that this is never going to see a bill in the House or the Senate. Yeah. I just don't see this ever going to be part of a budget process. I don't see this going anywhere other than him trying to pander for votes. I just don't see the reality of this.
And I agree with that. It seems like it's because when he talks about it, when you read the articles about it, it's almost like he's trying to say, "Hey, look, I'm sticking it to the man." You know what I mean? To the people who are making more money.
It's going to actually end up potentially sticking it to the very people he's hoping to help.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Bradys and the Roethlisbergers, and those people are doing all right. And you sit there and say, well, listen, they may not get as much of a benefit as they used to, but hey, it's going to help the Cowers making, 80 grand a year, or potentially less. But then you start saying, all right, well, now you got, a household, maybe family of two, couple of kids, single employer and single income household. They're pulling around $50K a year. Already, they could say, well, Chris, is it going to be a benefit to me? I'm putting away 10% of my income. I'm contributing $5,000. This is going to be great. I'm only in the 10% bracket. And again, because everything in the tax code is contingent, and usually, especially when it comes to incentives like credits and deductions, are all phased out at a given level of AGI or taxable income. So if he no longer gets that amount, the actual tax bracket is 12%, not 10%, because it's a higher tier. He potentially loses the earned income credit that he would have gotten. He would have qualified potentially for a saver's credit that he's going to forego because all of these different income metrics. So here's a perfect prime case of a household that he's trying to target and reward them for doing the right thing. And at the end, if you actually go through all the math, this is going to hurt them more than it would help them. It's just one of those things. There are too many other contingencies. And there's already a credit, like the saver's credit I mentioned. That's already a tax credit that is an incentive for people to contribute and a match up to 50%, in some cases 10% if you're in a higher bracket. All of which we're talking brackets below 65K in taxable income.
Yeah,
you're going to get some benefit already just doing that, and that, to me, it's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, I think it was just a talking point. Something that sounds good. I don't see this, getting any traction. But the reason I wanted to talk about it, when I decided to cover this last week, is because, in my opinion, and what's going on in politics right now, we don't talk enough about policy. You know what I mean? It's awesome. I miss those days when you would talk about who had the better policy and you have a debate that way. But unfortunately, it's become who's racist, who's not racist, who's done this, who's slept with who, and who's done that. And that's a shame. And so every once in a while, I think it'd be nice just to delve into some policy. Now, what I wanted to also talk about are your thoughts on tax policy in general when it comes to government.
So, listen, I'm a purist. Okay, I understand that the power to tax is important in order for the bills of the United States government to be paid, and as such, we all have to do our fair share, if you want to call it that. But as a result, it should literally only be the amount that needs to be in expenditures.
Mhm.
It should literally be everyone gets to have to pay a portion of their income or whatever measure needs to pay in. It should never have been a political weaponized system that will, pander for votes and you're effectively buying support. This notion that the tax code should somehow be a social welfare program and used for the redistribution of income is absolutely insane.
Mhm.
Internal Revenue Code or the Internal Revenue Service is literally to get revenue for the United States government. The tax
Mhm.
code is the mechanism in the legal enforcement of it. So this notion that we're going to be using it to then create a effective welfare program, which is in the case for about the bottom 40% of all taxpayers, this is definitely a newer. I don't even know if it's necessarily new, but this is never what was intended. I think if the founding fathers were to see what was going on now, they would roll over.
Mhm.
In fact, this paradigm really didn't shift until the passage of the 16th Amendment, when it gave much broader powers to the Congress to
Mhm.
impose a tax. Beforehand, I mean, their taxes were very limited and had to be equally apportioned among the states. There was no ability to tax income. And then they go, fast forward 100 or so years, and you got the 16th Amendment passage, and what you see now is the ramification of that. You basically took the pit bull off the leash, and now they're playing politics with it. This
Yeah, and
is
and
that
that's and
brings.
that's why, I would like to know hear your thoughts on this. A flat tax, that way everybody has skin in the game. What do you think of that?
I love a flat tax.
Hmm.
It may create my unemployment, but I do love a flat tax. So
Hmm.
to me, if you had a simple base, and that's the other thing that's convoluted. So a lot of times, even the Herman Cain method,
Hmm.
999,
999.
right?
Rest
So
in peace, Herman.
he had a great idea. I think in theory that was a better idea than what we have.
Hold on. Hey, hold on one
You
second.
have to have the right.
Hey, Joe, what did you think of Herman's 999 plan? No, nothing, Joe. Okay, good.
Yeah, he's still trying to figure out what nine. Um, but I do love that photo. Um, but in his plan, like the inconsistency in the tax base, because again, you're looking at you got corporate taxes that are allowed certain deductions against income and how to come up with it. But the same thing is going to happen if you have a flat tax. There's always going to be some complication when it talks about what is income versus what is gross proceeds of something.
Hmm.
And in gross income and gross proceeds aren't necessarily the same. So I think you have to figure out what is the most the simplest method to take, and then use that on a broad spectrum and apply the tax. I know that, listen, some objectors to this say, well, that's never going to happen. It's going to shift the burden too much on the lower income households. That could very well be the case, but if those lower income households are working at all, they're already paying 6.5% or 7.62% of their earnings in Social Security taxes and Medicare
Hmm. Yeah, and honestly, I just think it takes a lot of the politics out of the equation, because the
it
way it's
does.
set up now with the progressive tax, you pit the bottom uh, tax earners against the high tax earners, and
Mhm.
and I know you talked about it with me earlier today. Uh, people get all upset when they hear the upper tax bracket is getting a tax break, but as we all know, they're the ones paying the taxes.
Well, they're not just the one paying. They're the only ones paying the tax.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look at the actual distribution of how the tax burden is factored in based on income levels, the top 20% of income producing households
Hmm.
pay 87.5% of the total federal income taxes collected by the federal government,
Hmm.
or individual income taxes anyway, and actually 69% of the total federal tax, including all sources. And
Yeah.
that's borne by the top 20%. You start factoring the upper quartile, now you're looking at almost 96%. Now,
Hmm.
the bottom 50 are actually paying less than what they're paying in. They're actually getting a refund beyond,
Yeah.
they're actually reducing tax burden below zero. That should never happen.
No.
That's what happens when you use the tax code as a way to redistribute wealth rather than pay the bills and the expenses of the federal government.
Exactly.
Now, if everyone had to feel the pinch coming out of their wallet, me, you, and as well as every other person, when they start hearing politics talk about, I'm going to do this, I'm going to spend this, or I'm going to institute this program, they may start looking at it. Well, all right, if they do that, I'm still going to have to pay a piece. Maybe not as much as my neighbor, but I still have to have that come out of my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
They may vote in differently if they know how much it's going to affect them personally.
Exactly. Totally agree. What do you think, Joe? Come on, Joe. Say something. Nothing. Hey, Chris, thanks a lot for covering that with us today. Matter of fact, if you don't mind, stick around after this commercial break. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court. All right. Give me one moment here while I kiss this guy. Give me a second. Oh, where did it go? Here it is. All right, we'll be right back. And welcome back. So, obviously, unless you've had your head in the hole in the ground for the past couple of weeks, actually not even past week, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, I believe, last Friday. Yeah, hard to believe. 87-year-old woman. She's had cancer now, I believe, for over 11 years. And quite honestly, she probably should have stepped down during the Obama administration. But she didn't, and so here we are. And now obviously the big argument is should Donald Trump name a successor to the throne, to the Supreme Court? And the answer, of course, lies in the Constitution. Is of course he should. That's his job. It's his job to make a nomination, and it's the Senate's job to advise and either consent or deny on his nomination. So it's pretty black and white. But obviously in the world of politics, they try to make everything gray. You have the Democrats now saying that he should not do so because it's an election year. But then if you look at history shows us that this has only been done 23 other times. We've had only 45 presidents. So over half the presidents have named a successor during their last term. So where the confusion lies, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get that side of the argument. But here we are. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
Well, I will say that regardless of what your political leaning is and what you really thought of some of her decisions and rulings, I think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is an admirable person. I think she served honorably, and I think I will say that I wish her the best in the afterlife, and I feel for her family. But I mean, no matter how you believe in it, she worked and she earned that merit, especially during a time where that wasn't necessarily a possibility. So kudos to her for a long career. I also would say
I'll give her this. She's definitely a tough lady to battle cancer for 11 years. I know she's very passionate for what she stood for. I did not agree with anything pretty much she stood for. But that being said, she's a human. I feel bad for her family, and God rest her soul. I thought she was more of a political advocate on the court, which we have too many of. So hopefully Trump will nominate somebody who will be actually translate or interpret the law according to the Constitution versus trying to create law, be a social justice warrior on the court. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Or you mean someone that might actually remember that Congress writes laws and the courts actually interpret them? Yeah.
That'd be a novel idea.
Yeah, that whole separation of powers exists in more than one way. But yeah, no, look, I think a couple of things. I think, regardless of the Constitution, I think if there was an amendment to be proposed to do it, I really do think that the Supreme Court nomination shouldn't be for life. That in and of itself, I don't want it to be a turnover every 3 years. That's insane. But I do think that they should have maybe I don't want to say an age cap or some sort of a tenure component to it, so that you don't get to the point where they're dying on the bench and you can already start finding out who the succession plan is. I think that that's, one of the flaws. I think, again, anything that bears the ability to make something politicized needs to be really rethought about, and whether or not that has to happen. But ultimately, look, it's the president's responsibility and it's his duty to appoint a successor. This notion that it should be politicized. Now, granted, I say that, but also look back, Mitch McConnell had no trouble making similar remarks. Now, different circumstances, he could have just voted the nominee down. He had
and that's exactly what he should have done. He was being lazy, pretty much. Either that, or maybe he was scared that it would go through. So he was looking at it, why even bring it up? But yeah, he should have done his job. Obama did his by appointing Garland, I believe it was, or nominating Garland. And then Mitch, poo-pooed it and didn't even bring it up for consideration.
Well, it shows like a lack of foresight to say, hey, could this ever be in a situation again? Is this comment going to come back and bite me in the ass? And I think he's finding out that it's kind of biting him in the ass. But at the end of the day, you got to go back to even before the comment was made. Any of these comments, it's the duty of the president to appoint the successor. Appoint the successor, vet him, vote on him, and get it over with. Even if the election was held tomorrow and they didn't make the appointment until the end of the year, it's still the same. He's still the president of the United States until he changes office, until a new president takes oath. Hopefully, it's going to be the same guy anyway. So in the end, it doesn't really matter. But it is his duty to appoint someone to fill that gap. To me, that's the right thing to do. It's not even a politics. It shouldn't be a politics thing. It's his duty as president.
Totally agree. And this week is going to be very interesting because I know they did agree. I guess the Senate agreed they're going to have a 3-day hearing. So whoever the nominee is, who I believe Trump is supposed to appoint on Saturday, all indications show that it's going to be a woman. And I'd say the leading candidate is Amy Barrett. There's also a lady out of Florida whose name keeps popping up. It doesn't come to mind right now. But it looks like it's going to be in between them two, with Barrett leading the way. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Democrats handle this, because obviously in the recent past, with Kavanaugh, you go all the way back to Bork and Thomas and pretty much everyone in between. They've just totally obliterated or tried to obliterate their character. So I kind of feel for whoever the nominee is, because they're about to go through one hell of a shitstorm, to be honest with you.
Hopefully, by appointing a woman, we won't have to hear about all the other women that was bring around with.
This is true.
This is true.
But I would
from that nightmare.
I don't know if I could put that past them though. So we'll see. But
hey, look, if they did, they may get additional support from the LGBTQ community.
This is true. This is true. I mean, because if you look at Barrett's background, she's married. I think she has a couple of adopted kids from Haiti. So it's going to be very well. I know they're going to attack her religious beliefs. She is a Roman Catholic. The only reason I know that is because when she was appointed, I guess, to the 7th District Court, Federal District Court, that's what they attacked her on back then, her stance on abortion. So I think that we're going to see a lot of replay of that, and I'm sure there'll be a few surprises up their sleeves, no doubt. But with that being said, let's go to another commercial break. I'm going to come back, and I'm going to give you my NFL Power 5 for this week.
Oh, God help us.
And we're back. And now I'm going to give you my Uncle Felix's NFL top five, Power Five. There you go, Chris. You see anything missing there?
Well, I see something missing from year over year. I think that's the you're not seeing the Patriots in the list, which is
Now,
the first time
now
in
in the,
20 years you didn't. So
in the Patriots' defense, I did have them on the list last week, and it was
now,
actually
now it's officially in the.
it was actually honestly pretty tough to knock them off because they did lose to Seattle, and Seattle, I believe, is one of the definitely top two teams in the whole NFL. So I'm not going to kill the Patriots for that one, but I did knock them out obviously because they had a loss. But anyway, so as you see, my top five is going to be Kansas City. Even though they struggled with the Chargers, which I found surprising, but it's a division game, so I get it. Number two, I got Seattle. Russell Wilson is just a straight stud. He threw 5 touchdown passes. He did throw one pick, but really wasn't his fault. It went right in and out of the hands of his tight end and actually went for a pick six. So technically, he threw 6 touchdown passes. The Ravens look phenomenal. I mean, that defense, Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP. I mean, he is just running through the NFL right now. The Packers, their offense looks unstoppable. Last week they had uh, um, what's his name there, the quarterback Rodgers. He threw 4 touchdown passes. This week, Aaron Jones ran for 168 yards. So that they're showing that they got bunch of different dimensions to that offense. And rounding out at number five, of course, my Pittsburgh Steelers, and their defense looks amazing. A little more sloppy than I would have liked to see against the Denver Broncos, but that they had 19 hits on the quarterback, 7 sacks altogether. Connor went over the century mark. Big Ben threw for over 300 yards, so it doesn't look like there's any question about his elbow going forward. They look like they're going to be tough.
Yeah, until
My
he
two,
stubs a toe or something. He seems to have issues keeping himself healthy. So
who's
we'll
that?
see.
Oh, Connor. Yeah. He's he's definitely has something to prove because actually week one he got injured and his backup came in and he ran for over 100 yards.
Mm.
Snell. Um, but my honorable mentions, I got the Raiders. I know I was shocked Monday night when they took down New Orleans because I thought New Orleans they're a top tier team. So for the Raiders to knock them off, that was pretty impressive there. Carr threw 3 touchdown passes. Darren Waller had 12 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. They look good against New Orleans. My other honorable mention, I'm going to go with the Rams. Goff threw 3 touchdown passes. A few years ago, everybody thought they were shooing for Super Bowl champs, and then they got to the Super Bowl, and the Patriots do what they did, and it made them look horrible, and they haven't really seemed to recover as a franchise from that since. But anyway, that's my top five. Um, I'll put it up on my Facebook page. You guys can go let me know what you think about that. The other thing I want to talk about was again the Steelers. I want to recap that game against the Broncos. Big Ben threw for 311 yards, threw 2 touchdown passes. He did throw a pick, an awful pick. I really, I really don't know what he was looking at when he threw that one. Connor did run for 106 yards. He only had 16 attempts, and even the 106 yards, it sounds a lot better than it really was because he only had at one point he had 13 carries and about 40 yards, and then that's when he busted one for a 59-yard touchdown. I would like to see them stick more to the running game. 16 carries. I'd like to see him over 20 a game. But again, he does have some health issues, so maybe that's why they're scaling back. Deontay Johnson had a big game as I predicted. He had 8 catches for a touchdown, and he was over 100 yards, I believe. And the rookie from Notre Dame, that's right, my Notre Dame Fighting Irish. How long before they cancel culture comes after that name, by the way? I'm surprised they haven't yet. But
It offends me. I know that much.
and I also congratulations to Claypool. He became the first Canuck to go to score a touchdown in the NFL. That was pretty funny to hear that. Um, but they look good knocking off Denver. It didn't look like their best football, but a win's a win in the NFL, and I'm not going to knock them for that. And again, as I stated earlier, they had 7 sacks, 19 quarterback hits, which is unbelievable. So they're going to be giving they're going to be putting happy feet on a lot of quarterbacks this year. Next week, they do see they see a great quarterback next year who I believe is underrated. They see Watson and the Texans. So that should be a good matchup there. Texans are actually 0-2, but they've played some good teams. So I'm hoping after next week, the Texans might be the best 0-3 team in the league. But I'm going to give the nod to the Steelers on that one. How about Chris? What do you think about the NFL? Anything you want to talk about?
Beyond the fact that I wish they wouldn't have basically converted this into a political year of social justicing. That
totally agree. I talked about that last week. It disgusts me, actually. You know what I mean? To sit there and get political commentary when it belongs nowhere in the sport, in my opinion.
And everyone wearing names of people on the back of helmets. It just, the whole thing is just,
it's insane. It's insane. I haven't checked the numbers this week on the ratings, but I know last week they were down pretty big. I'm going to assume they were down again this week here, compared to previous years. So hopefully that's a wake-up call to these owners and to these players, because obviously that TV money is going to affect these contracts.
I'm fine with people having a point of view. I'm fine with the players trying to use their voice outside of the arena.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're playing at the game, before the game, during the game, that's when you need to leave all your side endeavors behind and just focus in on the game and not have all these other distractions and noise.
Yeah.
If it's the only way that I could get everyone to the table to play, fine. At the end of the day, selfishly, I want to watch football, so I'll look the other way and ignore the crap. But the reality is that this is just one of the other sports that are doing this.
Mm-hmm.
As far as my thoughts on the NFL, I think the injuries are getting serious. I think, watching how the 49ers have been decimated already week 2 with injuries. We've got Saquon Barkley out, Christian McCaffrey out for at least the next 4 to 6 weeks or so. When you start, how much of this is not being able
no preseason,
really, that's scary. And I think these players are putting a lot on the line to do this. And also, I think when you're looking at these team matchups, anyone who had a headline is taking time off for COVID, are you really getting the best of that team, or are you getting a dwindled version or a watered down version of that team?
Yeah, because I know the Patriots, right? I think they had like 4 or 5 players on defense opt out of the season.
Yeah, and it shows. I mean, their defense was. Honestly, it looked like Russell Wilson was out there playing catch. I mean, he wasn't getting pressured, and they could throw the deep bomb all day long because he had time. I mean, it was.
Yeah. I mean, that guy's special though. Russell Wilson, that guy, he's going to be
he is special.
A great one.
I think it's funny that 3 of your top 5 are running quarterbacks or option quarterbacks. I mean, that's something you didn't see all the time.
No,
it's starting to see that trend where in order to really have success, it's almost like the traditional pocket passer is almost out of the mix.
Yeah, and you know what though, you kind of seen that coming just because that's what you see in college football, right? And obviously NFL that's where they draft their players from. So eventually it's going to make its way to the NFL, and the NFL almost seems like in a transition period right now. For the last few years, it's been pass, nothing but pass. But you're starting to see the change now. Where you're starting to see more running. Now the quarterbacks are running as well. It's starting to look more like college football again, because that's where they get their players from.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
In Felix, I don't know how much longer we got on this, or if you're wrapping up, but if I could just quickly throw out a little tidbit.
Sure.
Tax policy issues and elections and everything else, it can get really hairy. I really encourage anyone who has questions on tax policy and whether the candidates may stand and how that works. 2 great resources are the taxfoundation.org. They're a free think tank type analysis site. They have great resources for people. In fact, there's an entire box on it that you can just check, and it gives you a presidential tax policy analysis. Another one is taxpolicycenter.org. Again, spelled how it is. Incredible resources. They have all kinds of material in there, whether you're interested in learning about any type of tax topic, but specifically about the candidates' proposals.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to know how a particular proposal may affect you and your personal liability and where you stand, and whether or not it's going to cost you or potentially help save you money, go see your local CPA. And I'm not talking H&R Block or whatever. I'm talking about actually going to see your local CPA and see if they can't do a back of the napkin calc to see how this would actually impact you as an individual. I think, oftentimes what sounds good, when you start doing the math, it doesn't actually look as good as it was. And, I highly encourage people to reach out and get those resources.
That's some excellent advice, Chris. And also, I'm going to reserve the right to bring you back on whenever I have some questions about some tax policies, because obviously whoever gets elected in November 3rd, they're going to be putting forth some policies, and I would love to hear from my tax guy.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Hey, thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. Thank you for coming, Chris.
Take it easy.
See ya. Well, folks, that's it for my show this week. I hope you enjoyed it. That was Chris, the tax guy. And I hope you learned from that as much as I did. And go Steelers. And I will see you next week. And God bless.